Welcome to the Fill Your Cups podcast. We're your hosts, Morgan
and Bailey.
Well, today we are talking all about regret and how to release it. So in our conversation, Bailey and I chat about how regret can kind of be this like toxic spiral that weighs you down. It keeps you from moving forward. And we're talking about ways that we've discovered and found to live and cope with your regret, but most importantly, how to reframe what even regret means to you and how to use that reframe and shifting your perspective on regret to help you move forward in whatever things you are dwelling on from the past that are making you feel really regretful. So I'm really excited. We really enjoy talking about deeper topics like this and just things that kind of plague our everyday without us realizing it. And so hopefully you enjoy this conversation about regret and you can relate to it and it helps you out a bit. Let's dive right in.
Let's get it.
Bailey, what's filling your cup today? What you drinking?
I've got my water as always, but then I've also got some wine. It's, wine down Wednesday because we're recording on a Wednesday. So.
Yeah, and you're almost kind of kickstarting your weekend.
Even
though it's Wednesday, you're going to the Bears and Chiefs game, preseason game tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then you are headed to
Savannah, Georgia, baby.
Georgia.
We're so excited. It's actually really funny because every time I tell someone that we're going to Savannah, Georgia, they're like, there's no NFL games there. There's no baseball games there.
Because you usually go somewhere for Mason.
Yes, because I'm always just like, I don't care where we go. Like, we can go wherever and I'll do whatever. Like, I love going to those games. But I keep being like, this is like my vacation because I've always just wanted to go somewhere. I like going somewhere that feels quieter and feels like beachier and things like that. Like I always just try to find equivalents of like Stars Hollow.
Yeah.
I just wanted to feel like that. And so
and you've been there like through there once before, just a quick blip.
Yeah, I went on a road trip one time with some girlfriends and then spent more time driving there than I did actually there because then I had to come back for our cousin's birthday. But so I'm really, really excited. We'll get to do a little bit more exploring this time because we have like 4 days, whereas last time I had like 8 hours.
Yeah.
So I am freaking stoked. And so this really is like my
kickoff.
It really is. I'm loving it. And
you've got 1 day of work tomorrow. And this is your Friday Junior.
It is. I was just going to say that. It's my Friday Junior. And after this, I have to pack too. So I'm like, just get a little bit of wine. We'll be fine.
Make it easy.
Yes. Make the decision process easier.
I love it.
Absolutely. What's in your cup?
I'm just having a raspberry lime spindrift right now. I was telling you beforehand that I had so many celebrations in July and the summer we just had so many like special occasion things. And I was noticing even in the beginning of August that for any old reason, I was just like, ooh, I'll have a drink here, a drink there, whatever. And I don't think there's any problem with that, but I just was realizing that I was drinking more than I wanted to. Alcohol, I'm talking about.
Right.
And so I'm taking a little month off, so I'll be back mid-September. We'll see, unless I just decide to cut it all together, which I don't see happening.
True.
But I have a raspberry lime spindrift.
Yeah.
And I love like those like seltzer waters and Zevias, and poppies and Olippops and all those good things. I have some like alcohol-free wine that I love whenever I do a little alcohol purge like this.
I love that you do that whenever because I feel like you've done several like just breaks here and there where you're like, I just feel like I need a break or like some time off, whatever, so you just go for it. But I love that you do that because I feel like you prepare yourself well with having other yummy beverages, so that way you're not like wanting to go grab something else.
Yeah.
Although you're more of like a social drinker anyway and not like at home. But
Yeah.
I like being at home and grabbing a glass of wine.
I do like that. That's why I don't keep a lot of alcohol in the house. But I feel like I guess I have more fun drinking when it is social.
Yeah.
But then
That's true.
if I'm drinking socially and then I come home, I just want to keep drinking. And so
oh yeah, me
so
too.
that's, I hardly ever reach for something when I'm just at home. It's like a continuation of whatever I did. Or like if Jared and I went out for dinner and I had a cocktail, I'm much more likely to want to come home and keep drinking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although if it's just one, then usually I'm fine. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, I like to take a month off.
Here and there.
Yeah, I feel like once or twice a year I do that. So
I feel like it's like you wanting a reset for your body. You're like,
it really is.
Give it a break.
It really is. And I notice when I am drinking more frequently during the week than normal, like in July and August, I feel like I do notice a bodily change, like in my sleep and a little bit in my anxiety and emotions and whatnot and hormones. And so I was like, let's just detox a little bit.
Yes.
And I'll come back maybe in a month, So yeah, I'm like a week into that. So.
Absolutely. I really like that.
Yeah, so that is what I'm drinking today.
Nice.
I know you have a shout out.
I do. My Miss Sophia Claire. Shout out to you, my bestie. I just wanted to give you a shout out because you've been a really great supporter for me, and I've really loved kind of having you in my corner. And I think you're like one of the only ones who is really watching the YouTube videos right now. But I think
fun.
I think it's so awesome. Like this past episode, she woke up in the morning, and that was like the first thing she did. She has to be at work at 10, and she Snapchatted me at like 9 and was like, I'm filling my cup early this morning. It was just us on her screen while she was in bed, and I was like, I love that so much. It's so fun. And so I wanted to give her a shout out, but I also wanted to say that she texted me something specifically that it was filling her cup, and that's why I thought of this.
Yeah.
But I love when people do that because I'm like, oh, you're thinking about me while you're like filling your own cup. That's so exciting. But I'm sure all of our listeners will know, but back to school just started.
Yeah.
And she got to take her precious little nieces shopping for Save School outfits. And she said that filled her cup. And I wanted to just give her a shout out and just say thanks for listening and supporting and being a good best friend.
Thanks, Sophie. Aw, I love that.
I know.
Such a good shout out. Yeah, we love hearing what's filling your cups. And and I don't know if, I'm sure she has, but I think that at first I think she was listening on Spotify.
I think she was on Apple, and then she went to YouTube.
Okay, gotcha. Well, regardless of where you're listening, please leave us a rating and review. For Apple Podcast users, I think you can leave reviews on Apple Podcasts, but not on Spotify.
Yeah.
I think on Spotify you can just do ratings. So regardless, give us 5 stars. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a review. I'm learning more and more about the podcast world as we get into it.
There's so many analytics that you can get into.
Yes, but reviews specifically do, even more so than just like a 5-star rating on Apple, reviews specifically do get us in front of other people
so cool.
and help the podcast grow.
Yeah.
So we would
Even
love
if
if you
it's
would
a
do that.
quick sentence of like, love listening, or
Oh yeah. This is filling my cups on Monday.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Something fun.
Yeah, a quick little review would be awesome and probably would get a shout out.
I'm going to say 100% would get a shout out.
Yeah.
Can't wait to see those come through.
Right. Yeah. So there's your incentive.
Yes, I love that. Well, kind of on to today's episode, as the intro said, we're talking about regret and kind of how it can affect us in our everyday life and what it can really do to us and how we can reshape that and kind of learn to live with it. So I feel like we have such a privilege while doing this podcast of being able to share how to be healthier, how to be happier, how to be like more fulfilled, things like that. But I feel like we also like to talk about the topics that are important, like self-esteem, and our last episode was about grief. And so we're also going to be tackling regret today, because obviously regret is something that everyone has. And I aspire to be one of those ladies at the end of my life that says, I have 0 regrets. Like, I'd love to do that. And I actually feel like as I've kind of worked through my own regret and kind of applied these things that we'll be talking about, that I really do feel like I don't have the regrets, but I know how it feels. You know what I mean? So I definitely want to dive into that today and how we can kind of acknowledge the regret and the consequences of those actions, but also learning how to forgive ourselves and make better decisions going forward.
Yeah, I think that that's the biggest thing for me when I think about reshaping and reframing what regret means. Instead of, I feel like the classic trope of regret is something that you feel badly about that was in the past.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's just one step further that you can take it to where instead of just feeling badly about it, you can look at it as a place to start learning from.
Yeah.
And informing you of how to make it better in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I don't know what it is, if it's as women, if it's as a society, if it's just at human nature, but I feel like we are just not kind to ourselves, and we just do not allow ourselves grace. And so I really just I just want people to be kinder to themselves and talk to themselves like they would a friend. You know, your friend's coming up to you telling you about something they regret. You wouldn't tell them oh, yep, stay in that. You should feel bad about that. You should think about that every night before you go to sleep. You know what I mean? And I'm just how can we kind of help each other move forward and be kinder to ourselves and give ourselves grace?
Yeah. Well, and I feel like I have heard something along these lines before, but I feel like when we're super critical and have super high standards of ourselves, that can bleed into other relationships because even though you might think, oh, and it is true, you're your worst critic, but even though you might think, oh, I'm just being critical of myself, when you're thinking such harsh negative things about yourself, that can often bleed into the way that you think of other people. And so if you're thinking about something that you did wrong or that you regret and you're beating yourself up for it, then the next time someone else does something similar, even if it's just internally, you may be beating them up for it in your own head as well. So, I think reshaping regret into more of a tool that we can use rather than something that weighs us down and bogs us down and kind of puts us into this dark pit of abyss whatever.
I liked it.
Dark abyss.
I thought it sounded great.
Dark abyss. And just makes us kind of spiral until we've done our time and gotten out of it. I feel like that's kind of the way to go. And especially because it can have such huge weight on our self-esteem and how we feel about ourselves, and can affect our mental health and just make us really really not like ourselves very much. I think that it's we want to look at ways that we can use it moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. So I love all of that. I feel like that genuinely kicks us off as to your first step, guys, is to give grace to yourself. Give grace to yourself and be kinder to yourself. I also think it's important to I feel like my next step, almost, all this isn't steps but just kind of tips and advice, but I want people to start looking at where they were in their lives when this place of regret happened. So I feel like it's super important to try to remember what was happening around you. Try to remember what your feelings were like at the time and kind of who you surrounded yourself with at the time, and see if that kind of gives you anything to work off of. So I find that a lot of my biggest regrets in life was during times that I was unhappy, or times that I was deeply insecure, or times that I just thought that I knew better. And so I think that it's a good first step to look at where you were and recognize kind of the path that you were on. And it's probably a lot different than the path you're on now, especially if you regret it, because if you regret it, it means that you wouldn't do it again. And so I think that that's a first important step.
Yeah, kind of evaluating. I think that when I think about, because I guess if we're talking about regret, we're talking about things that we did in the past that we wish we hadn't, or and so when I think about ways that I acted that I wished I hadn't, or things that I did that I wish I hadn't done, or maybe done a different way or something, I feel like a lot of the time it was coming from a place of insecurity, or a place of maybe just feeling just not as confident maybe. And so kind of overreacting or things like that.
Yeah,
And-
feeling like kind of out of control sometimes can be
Oh,
something
definitely.
that you act certain ways because you, without knowing it, you feel out of control. But then you can look at it through a hourglass.
eyeglass,
No, you can
magnifying
look at it.
glass.
No. Okay, but you can look at it from a distance now.
Oh, okay.
And see it for how it actually was, but in the moment you're not gonna know that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah, I definitely agree with you of the, I don't know. Yeah, it can just be like that. So I think that it's important, and I feel like I'm just gonna say give yourself grace this whole time apparently because I want to say it again.
Yeah.
Giving yourself grace and where you were at in your life when this happened, and who you surrounded yourself with, and what path you were on, and how you were feeling. Like, yeah. Anyway, I could get into a whole thing about emotions and feelings, but I'll save it.
I think that the things that I tend to feel most regretful about are the ones like things when other people saw me in a in a place that I wasn't doing my best or living my best or whatever. And I think, like you said, we do need to give ourselves grace because we're never going to be 100% at our best all the time with everybody.
Absolutely.
And I think in my head, it's almost like the times I look back on with regret the most are times when someone kind of saw my true colors for the first time, or that sort of thing. Like there was a layer of me that they saw that is not necessarily the layer I wanted them to see.
Yeah, there was like a layer of shame.
Yes, exactly.
Shame for sure.
Yes, and I was going to actually talk about this because I feel like the things that you feel regretful about vary, but we had our Enneagram episode, and there's a triad in the Enneagram, and it's the gut, heart, and brain are like thinking triad, I guess. Okay. And so intuition, feeling, and thinking. Okay. And I'm in the heart triad. Are you shocked that I'm
not
feeler?
Even a little. Not even a little.
Feeler. Yeah. And so in that triad, it's 2, 3, 4.
Okay.
They have their core. It's like core feeling that, I guess, negative feeling that everything you do kind of roots from it.
Oh, yes.
Is shame. And
look at that. That's crazy.
Yes. And it was very informative to me whenever I found that out, because I was like, actually, yeah, anything that I look back on, I definitely was, I felt very ashamed of.
Yeah.
And yeah. And when I do have regrets, it's usually because of the way that I think someone views me now, which is a source of shame.
Right. No, it totally is. That is really cool. I wonder what my triad is.
Yeah, that triad's a little bit weird because so each number can either suppress the feeling, lean into the feeling, or something else. I can't remember. We'll have to look it up. But yours is fear, but 7's suppress fear.
So 100%.
Yeah. So instead of like innately you have a deep sense of fear, but you just kind of suppress it and move on with other things. 8s, who are very like controlling, they have fear, and so they act on it. You know, if that makes sense. Like they try to get ahead of it.
Yeah.
Almost.
No wonder I feel like 2 different people all the time. I'm like, oh my gosh, how do I keep up with myself?
Yeah.
I'm like always acting different ways. You never know how I'm going to react to something because either I'm like, okay, anyway, or I'm like, okay, fix it. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah. And actually, so I think it's 6, 7, 8, not 7, 8, 9. But yeah, because 9s, 1s, and 2s are.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely more 6 and 9.
Yeah.
I don't
also,
have the
maybe
9 in me.
I might have gotten it wrong. I know mine's shame for sure.
Yours sounds right. It sounds right on the nose.
I know one of them's anger and one of them is fear, and I thought that it was fear, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway. But no, that does go on to kind of my next bullet point that I want to talk about is figuring out why you regret it. So do you feel ashamed and that's why you regret it? Did you hurt someone and that's why you regret it? Did you like hurt yourself and that's why you regret it? Did you miss a big opportunity and that's why you regret it?
Yeah.
I feel like figuring out kind of the root of why can help you figure out how to reshape it and figure out how to move on and make better decisions in the future, is figuring out like what actually is the root of that regret, quote unquote.
Yeah, for sure. Because if you don't know where it came from or you don't know the trigger, then you don't know how to stop repeating that pattern in the future.
Yeah, 100%. I also feel like you don't know how to stop thinking about it.
Yeah.
Constantly. Like if you
dwelling on it.
Dwelling. Yes, that is the word, dwelling. It's a rough cycle. It's a toxic cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. So talking about what was going on when it happened, and then talking about why you feel like you regret it. And then really the next step is, what can you do now? Making amends.
Yeah.
So sometimes we feel like, oh, it's just, too much time has passed. I can't really make that right anymore. But it's really never too late.
No, it's never too late. I feel like whenever I was we were making this outline, I was remembering what you were saying during our red flags episode for our jobs.
Ooh, yeah.
And I was like, yeah, sometimes people just feel like it's too late. And you're like, it's never too late. Like, there's never gonna be a moment where time has run out until it literally has.
Right.
Like, and it's the end. So I think, like, I was inspired by that. And I truly agree. It is truly never too late. Now, you don't know how the other people will react. Like, and not that our listeners' regret has to be something that they did to another person or something that affected other people. It could have been a missed opportunity. It could have been moving away. It could have been like any types of things. But making amends, it's never too late.
Yeah.
I love that. If you did have something that's a relationship-based one, reach out. You might not get a response. That other person might not be ready to do something with you, but at least you can kind of have the comfort that you took a step to do something.
Yeah.
You can also make amends by if you feel like you picked the wrong degree and you don't like what you're doing with your degree anymore. You can go back to school and try to get something new. You can try to find a field or a job in the field that maybe you are more interested in. Like, there's always ways to kind of change it up and to make that amends with yourself.
Yeah, I think that we have regret about financial decisions, and we have regret about relationship decisions, and we have regret about work decisions, and just all sorts of things.
Of course.
And like you said, it's never too late.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, if you truly are sitting with this regret, that might be your first sign that you need to make a change.
Yeah, absolutely. Side note, have you ever read The Midnight Library?
Yes.
It's all about regret. I know. I feel like that book.
So hard.
It is so hard. I feel like if there's anyone out there really dealing with like so much, right? I feel like I could honestly think of a couple people that just kind of stew and let themselves be run by their regret. Like, I'm like, read the freaking Midnight Library, because that will show you. It basically goes through like all of her lifetimes that she could have had. Yeah, scenarios where she's like, oh, well, if I could do this differently, I would. Or if I could do this differently, I would. And it takes her through all those lives. And you see why all those lives are so different. Maybe it wouldn't have worked out. What it would have been like. And and then there's
They're
just
like parallel
millions.
universes. Yeah. And then she ends up selecting the one that she...
is currently a part of.
Right. Yeah.
her current
Spoiler
life.
alert, I guess.
Oh,
but
yep, spoiler
I
alert.
think you kind of get that vibe anyway.
You definitely do.
Yeah. But it's really a good conversation starter when it comes to anxiety and regret and even depression, I would say.
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, I feel like it was really good. Yeah. But it kind of showed that you could have taken lots of different paths, and maybe now you even can, like, you can try those out.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the end, it's going to come down to you just being happy with you and being happy with like your choices and being confident in those.
Absolutely. I know 100% Midnight Library is so good, guys. If you haven't read it, you definitely should.
Yeah.
But our next thing after figuring out all the whys behind it and making the amends and making the steps, our next one is changing your behavior.
Yeah.
Just 100% changing your behavior, figuring out like a life that you can live that proves that you have changed your behavior. And if you're regretting something, you're not going to do it again. So prove it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a big thing that I tend to stew on. I don't know if you do this, but I replay
Oh,
especially fights like in my head a lot, and I think about ways that I could have said something, or like better things I could have said to validate how I was feeling.
Oh, yeah.
And things like that, and which is really never helpful.
No, it never is.
Yeah.
Do those happen at night?
Sometimes,
After 9 p.m.?
Yeah, sometimes when those thoughts aren't real. Yeah, but I think that what I want to start practicing more is when I'm running through this thought loop or conversation loop in my head, I want to be more aware of that and stop it and think, okay, instead of thinking about, what argument I could have said that would have validated my response more, just thinking about, okay, next time that I enter a conversation like this, or next time that I'm feeling really out of control, or I'm feeling really insecure or whatever, how can I be more aware of the words that I'm using, so that later I'm not like, I shouldn't have said that, I should have said this, I should have said this, because I think that I start to get really defensive, and I'm just sitting here all on my own, defending myself in my head, and really all that it was that I responded poorly to a situation because I was feeling out of control or whatever it is. Yeah. And I instead, next time, I can use that as help to not respond that way.
Yes, 100%. I also think that whenever you prove your life and you change your life and you prove it, I think you can also use the experiences that you went through to help other people. Like people younger than you, maybe. Like, I feel like you've given me so much advice so many times just because like you had lived longer than I had. So you'd been through different experiences than I had. And I feel like I can do the same thing for my friends and Chloe Love. And I mean, even for older people, like I can say like, I've actually had this done before and blah, blah, blah. So I think that that's such a cool thing. But you can't give advice if you're still in it. Yeah. If you're still stuck in your own patterns.
Yeah, that's true. If you're still like reeling, then you're not gonna be able to give someone.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like for me, just on this one again, is that I have some regrets that I feel like play a lot on my character, and I think that a lot of them for me, I just have to remember that I'm such a different person now than I was whenever I would like had these big regrets in my life, and that, I mean, a lot of years have passed kind of things, and I do believe that I have changed my behavior and I live a life now, and I think that if I didn't, I wouldn't have been able to move past or reshape my regrets. So I think that that's such an important one. Yeah, kind of going along with changing your behavior and becoming a different person and whatnot, and then looking at your life for the proof that you are a different person. I feel like when I think about myself in past stages of life where I'm like, I would never act that way anymore, I think about like past relationships, or I think about just, I don't know. It's very easy for me to disassociate from who that person was, rather than looking back at that as help shaping me to who I am now. So I feel like when you talk about regrets that shape your character, like maybe certain choices that you would never make now. You know, certain choices that you might make like in relationships, or might make about going somewhere, traveling, or financial decisions or whatever. Like I definitely know that I regret some of the silly financial things that I did when I was in college and whatnot. And it's like that buyer's remorse.
Yes, I get the worst buyer's remorse.
You do.
And and I think a lot of it is just because I don't look enough at, okay, all those decisions shaped me to who I am now, and I kind of just disconnect from I guess I disconnect from the person I was when I made that regretful decision, kind of, instead of allowing myself to accept that person as someone who got me to the person I am today.
No, absolutely. I honestly, that goes into the next one too, of I love the saying, you don't know what you don't know. And at the time, like, I don't know, a couple years ago, like you had just said, you would never do then what, or you would never do now what you might have done then. And it's because you know more now.
Mm-hmm.
You're smarter now, you're older now, you've been through more now, you know more people now. Like, it's just so different. And I feel like that, again, goes along with giving yourself grace.
It really does.
You don't know what you don't know.
You don't. And I think that this is just top of mind because we did our grief episode recently. But I think another common regret is regret of not doing something.
Yeah.
Like not reaching out to a loved one and then they pass.
Yes.
Or not spending enough time with them or things like that. And I think, again, that's something that you can use. First of all, look at yourself, give yourself grace. You did not know that that person was going to pass. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
But you can still use that to help inform your future. You can still use that to be like, okay, I lost my brother. I want to make my sibling relationships that much more of a priority in my life because I don't want to ever feel this way again. And I want to be able to, like you said, like at the end of your day, say, I really poured into my sisters and, that sort of thing.
Absolutely. I actually, whenever I wrote this part down, I actually thought of the grief part of it because you don't know what you don't know. You never know someone's going to pass. And I have a friend who, she had someone close to her pass and she had just recently deleted all of their messages just because she was like clearing out their phone or something like that. And like now she's lost all of those. And I know she's really, really regretful over that and beats herself up. And I'm like, you had no idea. There's no way.
You couldn't have known,
You couldn't have known. So you can't beat yourself up over that all the time. It's so hard because then all it does is affect your self-esteem. It makes you like equate that regret with who you are. And it's so hard.
Yeah.
It really is.
And I feel like going along with regrets of kind of inaction, because that's what this is. I think that I tend to regret my action more than my inaction just because I am a very reactive person, unfortunately. And fortunately in some ways. But so I have more times where I act too quickly rather than really, and I guess in relationships and whatnot, but I react too quickly, and so then I regret that rather than regretting, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this is making sense, but
no, it makes sense.
Regretting inaction, like for instance, not taking a risk or not going on a trip or things like that. I think that I used to take fewer risks, or I used to ignore desires or whatever more often before, honestly, I went through a bout of grief and realizing that our time is very finite and, we have so many days here, we have no idea what that number is.
Right.
And so I think that in that I've become more, I guess, like act on my
you really have.
Act on my impulses, act on my desires, say yes to the vacation, say yes to the trips, that sort of thing. And, pull the trigger on a lot of different things that I'm wanting to do. Say yes to doing a podcast, that sort of thing. So like if inaction, I feel like if inaction is the type of regret that you are struggling with, then that's the moment to take just like the tiniest little action. And especially if it's related, I didn't put this on our steps, but you're good. But especially if it's related to like, oh, I really regret not having reached out more often or things like that. Like you can do that really easily right now. You can really take action on whatever it is that you're thinking about on repeat in your mind of, oh, I really should have done that. I really should have done that. Like do it.
Absolutely. Do it. I like that. That's good advice. Just do it. Be a yes man. That's fun. Well, I feel like those are kind of all the things. And now we go on to you've mastered all of this. You have reshaped it. You're okay with it. You've made your amends. You've forgiven yourself. But what do you do if it's still bothering you? If you still can't stop thinking about it, or you still replay the conversations in your head over and over and over and over. Just a couple tips on this one. First, a reminder. You will hear me say this 100 times. If you are like me and you replay your conversations over and over, or you replay all the what ifs in your head over and over, that's my big thing. I'm a what if girl. In my head, it's just, well, what if this had happened? Or what if I did this? Or what if I did blah, blah, blah? or what if I hadn't acted this way in front of this giant group of people? Like, would I still have the respect? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I do all this right before bed. So it's like what stews my mind is why I can't sleep. And I just want to remind everybody, thoughts after 9 p.m. are not real thoughts. You are thinking these thoughts because your brain is so tired, you are so exhausted, and it's just trying to keep running because your body's up. It's got to give you something. It's fighting you. I don't know. Sometimes our bodies and brains betray us. I don't know why. They should be our best friends. But just a reminder, guys, thoughts after 9 p.m., it's not real. But while you have that disclaimer, if you're still finding that, what I have done and what's helped me a lot is sleepless nights, or nights when I can feel my anxiety racing, or nights when I can just really feel the past regrets of, oh my gosh, this one time at a bar 3 years ago, I screamed at Mason in front of everybody and ran away, and it was this whole thing. That really happened. It was bad. And I think about it all the time, even though I've forgiven myself, and even though I know that's not who I am anymore, and I know what was happening in my personal life during that. But it helps me so much to journal about it and just kind of like get it on paper. So I feel like, you journal pretty often, but
I wish I had a better practice of it. I do like the gratitude journaling.
Yeah, that's right.
But I wish I did a little bit more just stream of consciousness. And I think that I could get to know my brain a little bit better if I did. I think it's just like, it would be nice to do kind of like a brain dump.
Yeah, that's literally what it feels like for me. So I think I had watched a therapist video about this. I mean, everyone always recommends journaling, but I feel like when I hear people say, like, oh, I journal for 10 minutes a day, or like, oh, you guys should try journaling, it always sounds super intimidating to me, because I was like, I don't know how to structure this. I don't know like how to format this, but it really can just be a brain dump. So when I can kind of feel my thoughts taking over and the racing's going on in my head, I literally just put it down on paper. And I don't put it on my phone, because I feel like on your phone you can type too fast, and you can it's just too...
And you can get distracted. You get notifications.
Yes, you'll be looking at the time like, man, I really need to go to bed, blah, 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 like whatever it is. So I actually put it on paper, and I just put it all down, literally stream of consciousness. Like I'll read it back later and be like, what? That's kind of crazy. But you can just tell I was just like, couldn't sleep because I was so plagued by these regrets of these fights, or the way I acted in high school, or what I did at my work 3 days ago. Like, you know what I mean? And so getting it on paper helped me so much, and it really can just get it off your mind.
I actually think that I'm pretty sure that psychologists and therapists actually use this specific like negative thinking journaling to help people get past it. So especially in cases of anxiety, like, okay, what's the worst case scenario? What are you thinking? Put that on paper. And then, or like, what is the thing that you're dwelling on so much? Okay, put that on paper. And that putting it on paper does give you a little bit of that release in the moment. But then also, if you are coming back to it a bunch of times, putting it on paper each time decreases the intensity that the thought has in your brain.
Yes, I can vouch to that, because I have done this several times now, and I can tell it gets littler. Like the pages, the first time I did this was like 8 pages. Second time, 6 pages. Third time, 3 pages. And it's so cool to look back at. And I can tell that my thoughts have shifted each time by just being able to go back and read it, which is super cool.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. Also, I have to say that I love whenever I get validated by you being like, no, I've actually seen like a therapist study on that. So I'm like, I made that up. I just thought it would be good advice.
That's funny. That's funny.
I always think that's funny.
No, it definitely works, especially in negative associations. Because I think that people tend to think that journaling, you shouldn't really be like, journaling is supposed to make you a more positive person.
Yeah.
It's supposed to so you shouldn't really be
therapeutic.
Yeah, and you hear about like gratitude journaling. So like you shouldn't be writing about like these terrible things.
Right.
But when you do it, again, like it's almost like exposure therapy.
Yeah.
When people have like big fears and they use that fear to help expose them to it so that their reaction to it becomes less and less and less.
I like to think of it as like venting to somebody. So
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of times it can be hard to vent to someone, even if it's your best friend, even if it's your husband, even if it's your sister. It can be hard. At least it can be for me, because a lot of times I feel like this regret and things like that are things that people don't openly talk about. So a lot of times I think you think you're alone in things, or you're like, I'm just being dramatic, or like, I need to get over it, blah, blah, blah. And so I think it can be hard to talk to other people about it, or like even they won't understand kind of situation. Yeah. So I love putting it on paper and journaling and just acting as if someone is on the other side listening to me. And really, it's just me. I love it. I love that.
Yeah.
I found that it helps me sleep too.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, I think the kind of like last little tip that we had was maybe finding some sort of silver lining in the regret, some sort of positive looking back. That's kind of like what we said about looking back and seeing how that person then shaped the person you are now. But really, what positive can you get from whatever it is that you're dwelling on? You know, is there something that you did right? Or if there's nothing that you did right, have you had this scenario happen or present the opportunity again and you went a different way? Or, you know.
Yeah. I even like thinking that, like, hey, like you regret this thing. You regret moving 4 years ago and you're like, oh, that was a bad decision. But did you meet someone along the way who now is a part of your life? Or, oh, I regret like being in a long-term relationship with this person. Like, okay, but did you learn things about yourself? Did you create new core values for yourself? Did you learn your new standards? Like, I feel like those are such silver linings. And we talked about toxic positivity in our grief episode, and I feel like this is a time where you can get a little bit toxic positive with yourself because you have to be able to find some type of good in it, because I feel like no matter what, there's always some type of good in it. I know for me, for a specific example for myself, several years ago, and this was, I like had just started dating Mason, my now husband. And I remember we went to a wedding, and this is so dramatic, okay? It's so dramatic. I'm a very dramatic person, I think. But we went to a wedding, and the song God Bless the Broken Road by the freaking Rascal Flatts, came on. And I've known the song my whole life. I love that song. But it came on at the wedding while I was with Mason, and I just started crying. And I was like, no, it really is like because I feel like when I met Mason, I felt so damaged because I was a little boy crazy in high school and like had a lot of self-esteem issues. And so I just let like boys tell me what I was or wasn't good for. Yeah. And I just feel like whenever I met Mason, he was so different than that. And so I remember always feeling like I wasn't good enough for him because I had all these like weird experiences with boys and things like that, and he like really hadn't on the opposite side of it. And so I remember that song coming on, and I was like, oh my God, it really was a broken road, but it really did lead me to you. Because I could like find the invisible string between us two, that I'm like, no, because if I hadn't had done this, and if I hadn't met this person, I wouldn't have met you, and I wouldn't have like I don't know, I think it's a funny circle that I can look at and see. Yeah. It was also very dramatic, but it was true. Yeah. Yeah. So finding the silver lining.
Yeah, definitely. I think that makes a ton of sense. I am trying to think, like, I'm trying to rack my brain for an example from my own life, and I just can't think of anything.
That's okay. So, I have another one if you want to hear it.
Oh, sure.
Okay. So I think you'll relate to this one. So when I drink, I lose my boundary on accident, or I cross the line.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I crossed the line of between drunk and between out of control, and it's a problem. But I have since gotten that problem taken care of, guys. Very proud of me. But I used to have that all the time. So there were so many times if I was feeling insecure one night, or I was feeling like I hadn't eaten, I was tired, like there was a good chance I was going to act out. And I so badly feel so bad for all of Mason's friends who had to watch me do that for years, and bless Mason for liking me enough to like stick with me. But I still remember my last freak out, and it was at my own home. It was after my birthday party, my 24th birthday party, I think, because we had gone to the winery all day. Which, guys, 24. That's old to be having a freak out. I still had it. But we had gone to the winery all day, came home, and we played like a game with some of his friends. It was literally called Stir the Pot, so it was supposed to do that.
Right.
I was too drunk to do that. And I should have known better, but I wanted to play because I had FOMO and blah, blah, blah. And by the end of the night, I was freaking out. All of Mason's friends had to leave because I was fighting and crying and a mess. And I remember that same night, Mason and I talking and being like, this isn't normal. Like, this is not a normal outburst, blah, blah, blah. And so I woke up the next day, decided I was going to go see a psychiatrist to be like, listen, girl, what is going on with me? Like, other people don't react like this. Even whenever they do cross the line, they don't act like this. And that is whenever I got diagnosed with ADHD and anxiety.
Oh,
so
I didn't realize that was when.
Yeah.
Okay,
that was
wow.
literally when it happened. I didn't start my medications until months later because I was really nervous.
Yeah.
But that was when I got diagnosed with both of those things. And so I could find where it was different for me than it was for other people. And I could, like, I don't know, I think just making or realizing that. Plus, I also did get on medication, which was great for me. But since then, I like am different. And I can control myself now. And like, so that's such a silver lining within all of those dumbass fights that I was having all the time and all those times that I deeply embarrassed myself.
Yeah.
Such a silver lining for me that I'm like, now I'm not like that at all.
Yeah.
I'm just a happy, cheerful time.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. Yeah.
It was a long story for a regret, but it's a deep one of mine.
Yeah, no, yeah, that makes total sense. I do like the idea of like looking for a silver lining or looking to see how it got you where you are now. I definitely think that there were things that I felt I had to like toss around the feeling of regret and shame with when Jared and I first got married, because we got married pretty young, and I think you can feel regret. Like, you're probably going to feel regret most closely tied to your closest relationships.
Oh, what?
So whether that's your family, your spouse, your parents, your kids, or really, really close friends, I think that's probably where you're going to feel it the most, because they're the people that are going to see that uglier side of you more often. And not necessarily ugly, but just the side of you that isn't.
The side of you try to keep tucked away.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And so I guess when I'm thinking about things like right now, I'm thinking of a silver lining because I was hanging out with some girlfriends at that paint night that we had.
So cute.
And we were talking a bit about marriage. Now, they've all been married within the last like year or two, and Jared and I just had our 8-year anniversary, and so
wild.
Yeah, we got married way too young, I always say. Yeah, don't recommend. But
Worked out for them though.
Yeah, no, we are fine, but I feel all the time that we got really lucky. And
dude, I feel the same way sometimes when I'm like, oh my, I just realized Mason was 22 when we got married. I was like, oh, you're a baby. But anyway, keep going.
No, that's okay. Yeah, I was 21, one day 21, and Jared was 20.
I remember.
So I just was talking with them because we were talking about just arguments and like normal things in marriages or any kind of partner relationship.
Yeah.
And I said something about, we were talking about like sleeping in different beds or something, and how like kind of the older generation did that a lot more, and
like having your husband sleep on the couch kind of thing, or like literally different bedrooms.
So they were talking about different bedrooms, and I was like, oh, I like have never really thought about that except for in like the old movies and stuff. But some older couples, especially because you have a harder time sleeping when you're older, sleep in separate beds or separate bedrooms because to sleep better. Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily mean that something's bad or wrong with that relationship. But I was like, yeah, I guess it probably all just depends on the, like, why? Because for me, the only times I can think of that we have slept apart from each other is when, like, we got in a really big fight and one of us slept on the couch, and which is also, like, a classic trope. But when we were talking about it, I was like, and they were like, oh, yeah, like, we haven't had that happen yet. And I'm like, okay, when I think about it, we were also really, really young and figuring out how to be
like straight up out of high school.
Yeah. Just figuring out how to be humans, adult humans. And then on top of that, we had never lived together. So being roommates. Yeah. And then on top of that, having this new marriage. And so anyway, so all that to say, I feel like when I think about that, because we've not done that. That was our first year of marriage. We probably did it a handful of times, but we've not done that in 7 years, and I feel like the silver lining for me was being able to share that openly with someone else. Like if you had asked me the day after one of those things happened, I'd be like deeply regretful. And maybe even a few years ago, I would have been too embarrassed to share something like that.
Yeah.
But because enough time has passed and we, learned from some of those mistakes and eventually, stopped that pattern, we were able to become like the partnership that we are now.
Yeah, you were able to change your behavior and prove it.
Yeah, and so I feel like being able to share it was a silver lining for me.
It's empowering. It's the giving advice.
Yeah,
you can share your experience with other people.
Yeah.
I love that.
So anyway, I don't know if that really ties in here.
I think it does.
But yeah, I think
you just pointed out 2 of our points.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I love the idea of like looking back, and instead of looking back with only shame or embarrassment or whatever feeling, negative feeling, looking back and being like, well, I mean, could that have been good for something? Or could I look at the change now and view that positively? And yeah,
absolutely. This one was not on our outline, but I just thought of this as you were talking about like sharing and things like that. And this might not even make the final cut, but I feel like something that we can do too to help get it off of just us is actually sharing it with someone else. So there's that saying like, I'm taking this to the grave kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
Where you really are just in it alone. And I had so many of those. So they were all ridiculous. But guys, I feel like I've lived like 9 lives. I swear to God. I don't know how. And like none of which I will be sharing on this podcast. And I don't even know if you know these things. But one day I was like, I have to tell Mason these things because he was my husband at this point.
Yeah.
And I was like, I have to tell you, blah, 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 blah. And I would tell him. And then he was like, that's not even a big deal. And I was like, really? And he was like, no. And I was like, wow, I don't even feel regret for it anymore. That's great to hear. Like, I don't know. So I just think that, like, sharing your shame or sharing your regret with other people can help you also see it from a new lens, help you not feel so overwhelmed and overpowered by it all the time. And it can just help to have a partner in your regret, even if it's a best friend.
Yeah. Speaking things aloud just in general reduces the power and intensity they have over you.
It really does.
It reminds me this is so dumb. It reminds me of like Lord Voldemort. How like like how Dumbledore's the only one that says his name, but it's like when you don't speak of it.
Fear of the name gives power to fear of the name only increases fear of the thing itself.
Yeah. Good job,
Harry
Hermione.
Potter.
Yeah. Anyway, so leaving off with that.
Voldemort, Harry Potter, close us out.
Yeah. I feel like, I think that these are all tips, tricks, ways that you can learn from regret or maybe minimize that feeling in the future or just reshape it so that it doesn't feel so overbearing and overwhelming in the moment and doesn't ruin your everyday life.
Yeah, 100%. And learning, guys, to give grace to yourself and to treat yourself kindly and treat yourself how you would if your friend was telling you everything they regretted. Mm-hmm. How would you respond to that? Respond the same way to yourself. And just remember to go through these bullet points and try to apply these to wherever you're feeling it the most. Mm-hmm. And hopefully it's helpful to you guys.
Yeah.
Well,
on that note,
cheers. Oh, that was such a little cheers.